Welcome to Retroality TV Presents Reimagine That with Chris Mann, offering refreshing reality with a retro twist. This week we present part 2 of Chris's interview with actress Joyce DeWitt. Also, interesting insights with our resident dream interpreter, Yvonne Reba. And now, your host, Chris Mann.
Thank you, Linda Kay. That's our vintage-voiced announcer and producer. And welcome, you guys, to the second episode of Retroality.tv's behind-the-scenes pop culture podcast, Reimagine That. We are your retro-progressive, cosmically conscious, and we hope, magically delicious rendezvous where retro pop meets forward thought. We have so much to cover today, from Ryan O'Neill's Andy Warhol napkin lawsuit to ongoing controversy with the Farrah Fawcett Foundation and a Facebook group connected to that. And we even have Joyce DeWitt, her second part of her great interview, in which she tells us why she hasn't spoken or reconciled with Suzanne Somers in over 30 years since Suzanne's contentious departure from Three's Company in 1980-81. Our theme this episode, and for future episodes, is really second chances. I feel kind of like this is the electric company. Second. But that is our theme, and we are going to explore that in different ways in this episode, certainly. It's a big theme in pop culture today, second chances. All My Children and One Life to Live are getting a second chance at life. Online in 2012, after being axed by ABC, Rosie is getting a second, or would that be third chance, at talk show success or struggle with Oprah's own network. And Roseanne and Tim Allen are getting second chances at sitcom success. Tim Allen is having some with his new show Last Man Standing. Roseanne is developing her new show for network television called Downwardly Mobile. That ought to be interesting. One show that did not get much of a second chance, even though it was supposedly about second chances and redemption, was ABC's rebooted Charlie's Angels. Reimagined and recently canceled after, I think, 4 episodes. ABC yanked the show, even though the 4 remaining episodes are supposed to be played in coming weeks. No second chances here for this show, despite the publicity blitz, the TV Guide cover, the Comic-Con PR tour. More on this in a bit. I'll examine the heart of what really went wrong with this remake, as well as NBC's Bionic Woman remake a few years ago, and other reboots of the 70s, 80s fantastical, iconic TV series. I think by exploring these 2 female-centered, groundbreaking shows from the 70s and what went wrong with these recent remakes, we'll kind of see this, recurring thread with this type of thing. In the meantime, I'm happy to report I just interviewed Cheryl Ladd today for a cover story in Well Bella magazine. That is a health and beauty monthly magazine distributed nationally through General Nutrition Center stores. So she will be on the December cover of Well Bella. Cheryl is one of our favorites. She interviewed for Retroality TV a couple years ago, and I certainly hope to have her back as a guest on this podcast in upcoming episodes. She has an episode of NCIS coming up at the end of October, I think on the 28th. She's currently shooting a movie in Canada for a feature next year, and she's going to be on NBC's Chuck, I think in January. So she's really busy. Hopefully we'll get her in December or January when she has a little bit of downtime. She's kickboxing these days, among other things, which I think is pretty cool for a gal of 60 years, especially, even though she looks like maybe half that age. She is still kicking butt. And I got a little bit of a scoop from her about her thoughts of Charlie's Angels 2.0 or 3.0 if you're counting the feature films, its cancellation in the last few days. I said to her, maybe this remake was too kick-ass and not enough heart. And Cheryl said, and I'm quoting here, a little preview from her Well Bella interview, I feel like people are reticent to hang on to a show unless they feel something for the characters. If there's something about the characters they can grab onto and relate to, I feel like they'll give it some time. Well, evidently, that wasn't the case here with this new Charlie's Angels. The show premiered to decent numbers in September, but episode 2, the viewership fell off about 29%, which was sort of to be expected, but then the drop kept happening exponentially after that. Cheryl continues, and I'm quoting, "I know I'm old-fashioned, and I've seen a lot of movies and a lot of TV shows. I'm kind of the belief that I never have to see one more explosion. I never have to see one more stunt. I really want to hear people talking to each other and see people care about each other. That's me. I know I'm 60, and I've seen a lot of that thing throughout my life, but that's how she sees it." And apparently, that's how a lot of us are seeing these remakes, these TV remakes, bringing these beloved characters and shows back into our homes, either reimagining the character or putting a new character in that sort of looks a little bit like the iconic characters, playing off of the audience's fondness. And if you don't get it right in the first week or two, that may be it. The 35-plus crowd may not be sticking around too much longer. So get those explosions in, get those high kicks in, but get some character development in immediately and some heart and soul. But more on that in a bit. She and Jacqueline, by the way, are looking for a new project together. Hopefully that will happen. And by the way, Kate Jackson, who it has been said helped create the original Charlie's Angels, even though she didn't get the credit for that. She's working on her biography, tentatively titled The Smart One, and it was originally set to be published this month, October 2011. But for some mysterious reason, it's been pushed back until next October in 2012. So we will see. I think we will have more angel activity in the coming months and years as people forget this remake and embrace the originals. Kate's book, I'm told, I understand, will focus in part on her long relationship with Farrah Fawcett, a beloved, good, close friend of hers. And we have some interesting news about the Farrah Fawcett Foundation. As many of you know, it was widely reported in recent weeks, ABC News broke the story, that the California State Attorney General is investigating, ABC News says, the Farrah Fawcett Foundation for possible mismanagement of funds, possible fraud, etc. Alana Stewart, Farrah Fawcett's friend and the president of the foundation, came out blazing, saying that was outrageous. It's not an investigation. It's just an audit. That this story was generated by disgruntled ex-employees of Farrah's and a-holes on the internet. Well, those a-holes apparently were a few vocal members in a Facebook group that began in June or May, I think, called Farrah Fawcett, We Want the Truth. And they spearheaded this letter writing campaign to get the state attorney general to investigate the Farrah Fawcett Foundation for a variety of reasons. Check out retroality.tv for the backstory there. The news is that Alana Stewart had her attorneys contact this group recently, last week, and send them a cease and desist order demanding that they stop publishing, potentially or allegedly, defamatory, libelous things about Alana Stewart and the foundation, and demanding that they remove anything that they had previously posted that would fall under that category. And not only did the group comply with her request, her demand, they disbanded completely in a matter of hours, or maybe a day or two after Alana Stewart had her attorneys come down hard on them. So that is the latest with that. Will this group return if the Attorney General's investigation/audit, whatever that is, uncovers unfavorable info or otherwise doesn't completely clear the foundation, which is led by Alana Stewart? Stay tuned. We will see, and we will continue reporting on this. Also related to the Farrah Fawcett estate, which funds the Farrah Fawcett Foundation, Ryan O'Neal, Farrah's longtime on-again, off-again lover, recently he's been embroiled in a series of lawsuits regarding a Warhol portrait of Farrah. I'll get to that in a second. He recently sued her alma mater, the University of Texas, claiming, among other things, that they have a napkin that belongs to him, a napkin on which Andy Warhol did a portrait, and he wants that back, and he says that the big portrait of Farrah's face, one of two in existence, one of those that he possesses is his. He has no intention to give it back. So here is the story on that. The UT system, the University of Texas system, sued O'Neill this summer for his possession of a very pricey Warhol portrait of Farrah, which they say they have proof belonged to Fawcett and thus should have been bequeathed to them per her living trust, in which O'Neill notably was not named. O'Neill says the artwork is rightfully his and has sued producer Craig Nevius, who executive produced Farrah's story, Farrah's documentary about her tragic battle with cancer, which was turned into an NBC Sweeps presentation in May 2009. A few weeks before her death. He sued Nevius this summer, alleging that the producer, who was also Farrah's close friend and business associate turned partner for 5 years, saying that Nevius instigated the UT's investigation and their subsequent lawsuit. Nevius adamantly denies all of O'Neill's allegations, though Nevius was involved in an ABC News report breaking Warholgate over the summer. And another of Fawcett's close friends / business partners, her college love Greg Lott, was indirectly quoted in the recent ABC News story about the foundation. ABC News reported that Lott, and I'm quoting the story's writer, quote, says the California Attorney General's office has been quietly interviewing friends, business associates, and several beneficiaries of Fawcett since early July. Again, Stewart called this situation outrageous and dismissed Lott and other unnamed parties as disgruntled ex-employees. That's according to Showbiz 411. It's worth noting that Lott, who has said he was Farrah's lover in the last several years of her life, he was named in her living trust. He received $100,000. Like O'Neill, neither Stewart nor Nevius was named in her trust. Lott, Nevius, and Kate Jackson have all come forward since Farrah's untimely death on June 25, 2009, saying that O'Neill and or Alana Stewart cut them off from Farrah in her final weeks, in Nevius's case, in Farrah's final 3 months. So again, stay tuned here at retroality.tv. We will keep covering this story. On a much lighter note, Charlie's Angels, the TV reboot. Oh my goodness. Apparently, this show, America Has Spoken, has gone the way of NBC's abysmal 2007 reboot of The Bionic Woman. Why? Well, that is probably a whole podcast there to get into all the different reasons. But I think the answer here, at its heart, may be found in a great quote that producer, writer, director Kenneth Johnson, who created the original Bionic Woman, starring the warm and dynamic Lindsay Wagner in the mid-70s, gave to me for an article I wrote about TV reimaginings last year for the Los Angeles Times. Kenny, who also created the original V, the reboot of which also recently petered out on ABC, said, quote, Reimagined is right up there with the word Titanic. I think trying to take something that's become truly iconic in the public's mind and reinvent it is always a dangerous prospect. People remember the original projects often with such clarity and fondness for the elements that make them so iconic and successful. It's very difficult to recapture that lightning in a bottle. He goes on to say that the rather mechanical and heartless 2007 Bionic Woman, quote, Heart was exactly the core of the Bionic Woman. The reason I hired Lindsay Wagner to begin with is she exhibited, as an actress and a person, all the aspects of humanity that were key to making the show work. Kenny is so right. And really, I think one of the main reasons this new Charlie's Angels did not take off in flight is the characters lacked warmth. You can be sleek and stylish, but you gotta have that warmth coming from these actors, coming from these characters and the writing. This, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the reasons I want us to reimagine the word reimagine. I want people who grew up with these TV originals to reclaim this word, refill it with the light-hearted buoyancy of our youth, and just let it flow. In other words, way less Titanic, way more Love Boat. Kitty's quote pretty much says it all from a man who will likely see his third iconic 70s, 80s series, The Incredible Hulk, reinvented. ABC has been developing a new version, though I wonder if, like David E. Kelly's interesting but unseen Wonder Woman pilot from this year, if the new Incredible Hulk will ever see the light of day. But in all fairness, at least Charlie's Angels was being overseen by one of its original executive producers, Leonard Goldberg. I also interviewed Leonard late last year, and here is what he had to say in an unpublished quote for the LA Times story, in which he recalls his prolific partnership with the late, great Aaron Spelling of Love Boat fame also. Certainly, and I'm quoting Leonard here, certainly the world has changed a lot since 1976 when we launched the Angels. We both had daughters. Aaron had Tori, and I had my daughter Amanda. We wanted to show them that the world was open to women, and they didn't have to be restricted by what was previously their role in society. He goes on to say that while today's gender roles aren't necessarily reversed, quote, certainly the playing field, in my opinion, is leveled. We don't have that inequity to play with anymore. We want, the New Angels, to be emblematic of women's place in today's society, and that's a tricky one to do while sort of honoring the show. It's a very tall order because the world has changed so much. So believe it or not, a lot of thought went into how to bring this whimsical, larger-than-life, iconic show that existed so perfectly in an era of 70s feathered hair fantasy into modern times. Was taking the avuncular and average-looking Bosley, as embodied first by the late David Doyle, who was sort of the audience's relatable, earthy link to the ethereal angels. Was taking that character and reimagining him as a 30-year-old GQ model the way to go? Was having the angels stand around somewhat listlessly, talking to Charlie through an electronic boomerang part of the way to bring this piece forward? Apparently not. But here's what I saw as the biggest problem. The original show had magic. The original angels had chemistry and charisma. Farrah Fawcett charisma. That's Farrah Fawcett Major's charisma. Recreating this essence is not easy, especially for a show that was driven by the talent, charm, and charisma of its stars. If the New Angels wanted to recapture the 30-plus audience, if that's even a dictate from the network, and it should be, I would have suggested that the New Angels, and I know at least one of them did not do this, watched a few or maybe several episodes of the show's first 3 seasons with Kate, Jacqueline, Farrah, and Cheryl, and really pay attention to the spirit, heart, and charm of the originals whose platform shoes they were stepping into. But now it's too late for that, because they don't work for Charlie. They are unemployed. On a final note, please check out my new interviews in the new fall issue of Get Active magazine. I interview racing legend Danica Patrick, as well as Criminal Minds star Shamar Moore. Get all of their stories about how they stay fit and healthy. And Get Active magazine is distributed nationally through various health clubs, but you can also find it at healthclubs.com. And coming up next, the second part of my lengthy interview with Joyce DeWitt. In part 2, she completely opens up about her Three's Company co-stars, especially John Ritter and Don Knotts and the Ropers. I'll also share my recollections. She also talks about John's kids. And I have to say, he has great kids. I don't know if you know this, but his younger son, Tyler, is following in his footsteps, as has older son, Jason, who is a big star now on NBC's Parenthood and on The Event last season. Tyler is now being seen in a new Old Navy commercial. You may have seen it with the music, "Don't Jiggle It When You Wiggle It." And Tyler is pretty darned funny. Some of his facial expressions and mannerisms in this spot are quite reminiscent of some of John's best Jack Tripper moments in the gym, trying to lift weights to impress a girl. dancing in Janet's aerobics class. And even though Suzanne was queen of the jiggle, John really was the king of the wiggle that could make you giggle. One of my favorite episodes was Charming Stranger from the 8th season, where John jiggles it and wiggles it as he walks sort of jelly-legged back to the front door after they discover, the trio, Jack, Janet, and Terry, what they think is a suitcase with a woman's body in it in their neighbor's apartment next door, which is only lit by the porch light outside. And once again, big old misunderstandings come knocking on their door. These images of John came back when seeing Tyler in this funny Old Navy commercial. So John Ritter lives on. And Joyce will share that truth about John. And as we resume her interview here, we left off last time with talking about Joyce's central tenet of her spiritual philosophy. So let's get back with Joyce. And again, we hope that you find Reimagine That to be refreshing reality with a retro twist. If you were to write your life story, and I know many people have asked you when you're going to do that.
I know, Chris. I know.
Would that be the essential message you would share based on all of the spiritual teachings that you've studied and experienced?
Oh, honey, I was asked that question once before, and so I will answer it in two ways. One is, in my own mind, which I have not said out loud, but I will share with you, which is know you so long and you have such honor and integrity in your work, the working title, which, who knows if I'll ever have the discipline to actually write a page, let alone a book. But the working title is The Art of Being Human, ... We are not born with an instruction manual.
I like it.
And I think that the other thing is that when people say, what did you learn in all those years of traveling and studying? It's like, well, do you have 10 years for me to answer that question? But in a heartbeat, although, after I say that, I have said that the Beatles were right. Love is all there is. Love is all there. So, in the end, I think all human beings are working towards, whether they know it or not, compassion for themselves, their fellow man, the universe, Mother Earth, nature, everything. And it is my belief that we are not a human being who has a soul. We're a soul that is walking around inside this vehicle called a human being. Mm-hmm. And that because we are souls, we are part of the infinite. We are part of the greater love that exists, and that the preciousness of Mother, Father, God, blesses and it lives within and is, in fact. Mm-hmm. That because we are that, we actually haven't been doing this human being thing all that long. Mm-hmm. So every day we're trying to do it better. And so that's what I think. I think human beings are always trying to do their best, whether by my standards, that's good or bad. But I really do think that all human beings are, and it's just that we weren't born with an instruction manual. But the more we do it, the more we, in this current time that we live in, there's such large darkness being expressed. Mm-hmm. And I think that is happening in part so that we as fellow man, woman, planetary dwellers can look at that and go, maybe power and money and all that isn't necessarily the end-all be-all. Maybe we should make another choice. Not that it's not good to have a big house and a fancy car and beautiful clothes and all that. No. But do you want to sacrifice your gracious relationship with your fellow man as you're walking down the street for that? And if the answer is no, because we've kind of done that, then it's like, oh, okay, well, let me nurture this compassionate relationship with, the planet and my fellow man and woman and see what are these other wonderful toys I can have while I'm here. Mm-hmm. I just think that's a better balance, that's all.
I think so, too. It's growing from the inside out, and I think that's always important.
It's called including everyone in the picture.
Right.
And still being allowed to seek out and enjoy the things that you want and the gifts that come your way. Yeah, some people get to be the Queen of England, and some people are, on Broadway trying to get enough money to go home and feed their kids, so. And I meant the street of Broadway. You meet so many homeless people in New York. It's
right.
It's like, okay, tell me, this is how much I got in my wallet today. So there you have it.
I love that you articulate that. You and John both have pretty similar philosophies on, you mentioned the Beatles, love is all you need. That another Beatles saying, I believe, is on his grave marker.
Yes, honey, because there was that poster in his bedroom on the set.
Yes.
And when they put that up, when they kind of redid the set and we went in, they took him in, and the set designers are wonderful artistic people, and they took him in, they pointed to it. They knew of his passion for their music and his compassion for their musical message at times, and they put that in his room on the set, in the middle of the first comedy.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, when I found that out years ago, I thought, well, that is pretty darn cool. So, you guys took this silly farce comedy that some people who maybe didn't watch it as much as others just thought was a cream puff.
Yes, I don't know what else they were doing because there's only 3 networks in those days. So they must have been doing the laundry.
Exactly. But those of us who watched it knows that there were layers to the show, and certainly the way you and John both lived your life, helping the hungry and the homeless and giving back, and people connect with that too. I think it's very cool that you and John, despite how Three's Company ended, you kind of came full circle, would you say, in the final years?
Oh, definitely, honey. And, I'm glad that you brought that up because I hadn't really thought about it in terms of the natural kinesthetic connection that we had and the way we worked together without even talking. We just knew how to work together. But I think that perhaps the overlap of our social and political and personal and spiritual, indeed, philosophies, that overlap, which really wasn't talked about that much. Over the many years that we knew each other, we found these pieces out. But I think in part that we were wired, quote unquote, similarly. That we were both very committed. I mean, well, I actually know this. The first week that we worked together, John and I sat down and said, we never want anyone. The first week after the show became in the top 10, we were like a series and major. And we said we never want anyone to guest star on our show that feels like a day player. That's someone who's brought in to work for a day, doesn't know anybody, that no one will come in and guest star in the show, even if they have 5 lines, and feel like they are not part of the family and one of us, and they can, we'll sit down, have tea together, whatever.
And I spoke to so many guest stars for the book, by the way, that said that the Three's Company experience, and people called out you and John all the time, was the best memory, best experience they had in episodic television. So you guys carried through with that.
Honey, thank you. Thank you, because it was a deliberate commitment on our part. It was a deliberate commitment on our part that the crew would feel completely safe and secure at all times to tell us what they needed. Because in Hollywood, they have to kind of try and get around what the star isn't giving them, the light's a little off, they're not or go to the director or second director and kind of whisper. And we wanted it to be very much like the theater in the sense where you just tell me what you need, and I tell you if I don't know how to give it to you. So, we'll work it out. But yeah, those were very deliberate, conscious choices, and a part of my love for John. And even though we might have gone through challenging times in our relationship in the many, many years before he left, we were as close as ever, in part because we both had this thing about wanting to make sure everybody got taken care of and nobody, was left out of the picture.
That's great.
And I have a huge respect for people who have that awareness, and I have an even larger respect for the few people that I've met in my life who are absolutely motivated by that awareness and yet know how to take care of themselves in the middle of that. And that, I think, is the extraordinary balance of living a life that I would, like to say I managed to do, and that would be that I did not sacrifice myself for others, and yet I never sacrificed them for me. That somehow, from moment to moment, I was gathering myself and them, but I was not leaving myself behind in order to gather them, or vice versa. That's, the earth plane is a land of polarity. There's, positive and negative polarities, et cetera, et cetera. That complication of vibrations rubbing it up against each other is what helps us to grow.
Well, that is so profound, and I know that...
stupid, I don't know which, but that's what I think.
But I know that you were on a spiritual quest before, during, and after Three's Company. Even though you grew up in a traditional Catholic household, you always were thinking out of the box. But then you're put in this thing called Hollywood, And then
Mm-hmm.
you're in this creative ensemble show with someone like Suzanne, who is, at the time, I think it's fair to say, was pretty much all about the fame game and the business, and to have navigated and brought those two realities together must have been a challenge. People know that you and John came back together. Can you set the record straight about efforts you've made or Suzanne's made, especially in the last, say, 10 years, to reconnect?
You know, sweetie, I have, in the last more than 10 years, reached out to Suzanne either by a note or a letter or a phone call to her assistant, actually even calling HSN when she was on there.
Right.
To just kind of, open the door. And there hasn't been a response to that. And so I have to respect that. She may publicly say, that John and I don't speak to her, or John didn't and I don't. But she's made that choice for a very long period of time. And, I have to respect that. That's what works for her. That's what she needs to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the only challenge, really, that I have in that is that I am asked so often
Yes.
by fans of the show, you all keep in touch. And they go, well, just had dinner with Richard Kline and his wife last week, and Priscilla and I were on the phone for an hour this morning. And I go, well, how about you and Suzanne? And they go, no, I'm sorry, we really haven't talked. That's the only part.
Right.
Because I know that it is disappointing to them, because they see Suzanne and I as those characters.
Yes.
And so I would just love to say, hey, why don't we just, be friends just so we can tell people, let's just, talk once a month, and I don't care if we talk about the laundry, but let's, let people be comfortable, because they have such love,
Yeah.
For these characters. On the other hand, the fact that she's made the choice not to communicate or interact, maybe that's, again, the polarities,
Right.
it occurs to me,
Polarities.
against the fact that they have such love for these characters who love each other so much, and then they're hit right in the face with the fact that, actually, not speaking at the moment. And I lose a little bit of, my heart is a little heavy every time that happens, and
Mm-hmm.
I have to, put myself back in center. But on the other hand, I'm just telling the truth. She's living her truth. They're asking a truthful question. It's bizarre, isn't it, Chris? I mean,
I was very fortunate to be invited to the memorial that was done to John 2 or 3 weeks after he passed at the El Capitan in Hollywood. And,
Yeah.
of course, you were there. Priscilla was there. Richard Kline was there. Suzanne was not there. And to me, that spoke volumes. It was a very touching evening, and I'll never forget.
It was beautiful. It was. And I will say that Nancy Ritter, John's first wife, when he was passed, he was married to the beautiful Amy, and they had their darling daughter. And
Amy Asbeck.
Thank you, Amy Asbeck. But, Nancy Ritter and John had his first 3 children, Jason Ritter, who's so accomplished as a young actor.
Oh, yeah.
And Carly and their little boy. I mean, they're these 3 amazing young people.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Dell is an amazing young girl. But during all of the memorials for John, because he and Amy were together at that time, and they were really a very happy couple. But Nancy, who was his first love, first partner, the mother of his first 3 children,
Mm-hmm.
was left unspoken of,
Yes.
and unhonored, and so forth. And she walked through that with her children in all of those events, both public and private.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much that happens when you have a public mourning process, and she walked with it in honor.
Oh, yeah.
And never blinked an eye, and never, and here much more of his life, was there. It's like with Priscilla. Priscilla was on the show for 4 years. Suzanne was on the show for 4 years. But because the birthing of the show was John and Suzanne and I, that remembrance of Chrissy and Jack and Janet is so much stronger than Terry.
Right.
And Priscilla is always like, way cool.
Mm-hmm.
And Nancy Ritter was so beautiful
Mm-hmm.
in lieu of being there for her children in respect of the life she had had with him, and in respect for Amy and their daughter during all of that. And so I had a great appreciation for her.
Absolutely.
Having such courage when the whole country is talking about this second beloved wife. and not mentioning the first beloved wife. And in some lifetimes, you have more than one beloved wife.
You do. And she handled it so gracefully.
She did.
One little thing that I thought was so potent and poignant and powerful, at the end of the evening, and it looked very impromptu, Jason Ritter got up and did a tribute to his dad and to his mother. And I think in part it was a way for Nancy to get the acknowledgement that she hadn't gotten yet that night. And his words were so profound. And I looked at that kid up there who at the time was in his early 20s. And I'm thinking, is this kid like in his 50s? Because he's an old soul.
Yeah, such wisdom.
And that right there told me everything I needed to know about the way Nancy and John Ritter raised their children.
Oh, honey, that is such a beautiful perspective that you are so accurate.
Thank you.
And what a brave young man to come up at that moment and balance it.
Yep.
And Chris, well, as usual, you're so perceptive. But yeah, they raised three incredible kids, and Stella, that John and Amy had, is adorable and a great kid. But she's so much younger. We're still almost talking about a pre-teener, a little more than a child. And that Jason and Carly and Tyler are young adults, and you'd want to know them, as you know.
Yeah.
They're beautiful human beings. They did a great job. It's amazing. John was a pervasively extraordinary human being on and off the screen. It was impossible to be in his life and not be affected by him. And the people that he drew in, the ladies that he loved as his partners, the children that he helped raise, the friends that he had. I mean, Bobby Myman, who was one of his very best friends in college, and then, became his attorney and manager in his career. I mean, Bobby Myman is still one of the dearest human beings I'll ever know. Just this wonderful, honest, great person.
So they do exist in Hollywood.
They do, and someone like John, knows how to draw them in. They may be hard to find, but they do exist.
And you and John, I have to say, speaking on behalf of many fans of the show, were the heart and soul of that project. And it's great that you are so open when fans come to you and want to express something about John too, because you can speak for that experience. And it's that connection that people didn't get a chance to meet John. I was very lucky that I did. And so many people said, oh, I wish I could have met him. And I know that you received that, and think it's very cool that you...
I know, it's so cool. You're walking down the street, or you're in the grocery store, or even on the phone with American Airlines, and they recognize your voice, and it's like, oh my God, you're Joyce DeWitt. And the next question, 99.9% of the time, is John Ritter as wonderful as he seemed? And it's like, yeah, he actually was, almost nearly 100% of the time. Right after the recognition comes that question. Then the next question, 99% of the time, is what about Don Knotts? And occasionally it comes in before John, but only a pinchy bit. But it always comes second. And then, they'll ask about Richard and Priscilla and Norman and Audra. But the first thing they want to know is about John. And it's either, was he that wonderful, or they go from, oh my God, Joyce DeWitt, to, I'm so sorry about John.
Yes.
And even, 8 years later, it is, as often as not, it is the next moment after their face, grins from ear to ear and they grab me. The next thing is this expression of compassionate mourning and love. So if you, have given that much through your work in your life, that 8 years later, that's what I'm experiencing every day.
Yeah.
Just going to the cleaners to pick up, my stuff. It speaks largely about how much his work said. And I know we didn't have time to talk about little Donnie Knotts, one of the most precious human beings on planet Earth, and his extraordinary gift of the work. And then Norman and Audra. I mean, we were just three young kids when we started, and here are these seasoned professionals who are like so cool and so good at what they were doing, and
so funny.
So neat to know. And so funny as those two characters. Give me a break with them as the Ropers. Oh, my God.
If I may just say this very quickly, you've spent so much time with us, and I'm so grateful, especially given your schedule.
Oh, honey, thanks.
My favorite thing to say to people about Don Knotts is how unassuming he was the few times I got a chance to meet with him. And I always say to people, I wanted to just say to him, don't you realize you're Don Knotts?
Oh, Chris, that is so much a part of the reason that I've enjoyed speaking with you over the years.
Thank you.
Because you are so perceptive. I always referred to Don as Little Donnie Knotts.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I did was because he was so unassuming. He would never ask for himself. He was this quiet person, quiet demeanor, soft-spoken.
Uh-huh.
And so I, always wanted to make sure he was taken care of because even though he was this huge star who came onto our show, he wouldn't ever ask for himself, completely unassuming. Wow. So you're absolutely right in that. And, John and I were like, oh, my God, Don Knotts is going to come work with us. And he comes in, his all quiet manner, nice to meet you, how do you do? It's like, holy shit, We have a legend in the room, and he doesn't even care.
John said it was like working with Santa Claus.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and the testament to how extremely talented Don was is that he was this soft-spoken, quiet, still, lady, quite successful with the ladies, man. And then he would walk out on stage and turn into someone that was plugged into an electrical outlet.
Oh my God.
The characters that he became so famous for, Mr. Limpet, Barney, and Mr. Furley, they were absolutely 180% opposite who he actually was. That's how talented he was.
It's truly amazing if people could see the contrast. And I have caught a few Three's Companies on TV Land.
In the middle of the night and stuff.
And I'll tell you what, Joyce, it doesn't matter how many times I've seen the episode. Don Knotts, it cracks me up. You all do, but that energy that man put into.
I know, he was just so incredible.
So
and
funny.
then Norman and Audrey for him. I mean, people always say, okay, I get asked this so often, what was your favorite, Mr. Furley or the Ropers? And, I will always say that old expression, apples and oranges. I love a good orange. I love a good apple. They have nothing to do with each other.
Right.
I mean, working with Norman and Audra as the Ropers was fabulous. They were in their own little world of interaction, and then they would sometimes come up and interact with us. But they brought the energy of what the two of them were doing downstairs in their apartment into the scenes with us.
Yeah.
So, they were, aside from being wonderful people that you really wanted to know, they were such seasoned professionals. And we were kids. We were just, trying to get it right in front of a camera, and they were just walking in doing it,
So pro they were. One little snippet here. About a year before Audra passed, she and Norman did an autograph show together, and I sat with them. I had interviewed them both for the book, which was coming up, and Audra had picked him up, and so they walked out to their car, and he had his suitcase that he was pushing around on wheels, and Audra was talking to someone else. And Norman was trying to get her to go, and he started walking around in a circle, and he said, come on, Audra, I have to be on stage in 10 years. And she said, Norman, take the damn suitcase and put it in the damn trunk. And I thought, oh my God, it's the Ropers all over. So
exactly.
It was like they were zapped back to 78 or something.
Oh my God. I mean, one of them liked it warm in the rehearsal, one liked it cool. So they would sneak over and turn the temperature up. And then we'd be working on a different scene or whatever, and one would sneak over and turn the temperature down. And it got so crazy that they came into the rehearsal hall finally, and they put a plastic case over the thermostat with screws into the wall, so nobody could turn it up or down except the person who could take the screws out.
That's great.
It was, you got the perfect picture. They were amazing. And last in our conversation, but certainly not least,
yes,
in our conversation in lieu of Three's Company, we had a crew that you could die for. I mean, our crew at CBS Television City, some of them had worked, on Playhouse 90 in the 50s. I mean,
wow.
These were people with such deep history in how to shoot a good piece of presentation, how to work that camera, how to angle it for the actor, how to get the picture for the story. Our, lighting directors, our costume people, our writers. You can't do a really good play in any form, film, TV, or theater, without good material. If you have good material, you end up doing something good.
Right.
And then, our director, Dave Powers, he was the best tape television director in television at the time.
From the Carol Burnett show with all these Emmys.
Exactly. All those years, and Carol was kind enough to retire her show, so we got him. And not only was he the best in tape television at the time, but there was no one within leagues of him. He was out there on his own in a position of excellence. So, we had a staff and a crew and writers, and oh my God, we worked in 3 or 4 different facilities, but mostly at CBS Television City, but at ABC and
Metro Media?
Thank you. In each of these cases, we had these wonderful crews. And so you're out there doing this silly comedy, running around, bouncing off a wall. And if you don't have an incredible crew that have a microphone over you and a camera that's on you, then you have to go back and do that again. And then it's fake. And then you're trying to work it up and do the whole piece so you can get that little snippet that they need. It almost never happened in all the years at Three's Company that we would have to do that, because we had these incredible light and sound and camera people and director and assistant director who were doing all that stuff. So we could just go out there and do the play, literally, like a play in front of the people.
So even though this show had such youth appeal, and it was about young people and contemporary and a little risque, provocative for the 70s, it really had all of this experience behind it, these people that had been in the business for years, to make it look so simple.
Yes. We were given the gift of working with extraordinary people who had that depth of experience, who were so willing. It was like they came to work in the morning and they did the wonderment of what they did without caring if they were working with Rock Hudson or this newcomer, named Joyce DeWitt. It didn't matter, They were honorable in, their contribution, and that's why the show is so strong, because the entire team was working on the same level. It's all about how do we get the most perfect thing that makes people laugh till it hurts. As John used to always say, we're not looking to make somebody laugh with the show. We want somebody to laugh so hard they fall off their couch.
And I can attest to that. That happened.
Good.
In fact, it was the episode Jack's Tattoo for me, the last season, and
yeah, with Priscilla. Oh my Lord!
One of the very best.
Yes, that was a great episode. That really was.
And just quickly, even though they weren't on the show very long, Jenilee Harrison and Ann Wedgeworth.
Oh, JL, a wonderful young girl. She was a Rams cheerleader when one of our producers decided to try and create the new character to replace Chrissy. And this young woman, she didn't know anything. She was, a model and a cheerleader. So the fact that she did so wonderfully speaks well of her. And then, afterwards she, went to start studying acting and had this great role on Dallas and, became a successful television actress. And then she's a really fine businesswoman. And then she kind of thought, you know what, I really like doing business better. So when she was on the show, John and, we'd be rehearsing a scene, and he'd go, okay, what's Jenilee doing? She buying a shopping center or something? Or she'd be like on the phone. And I go, JL, are you ready to start? Because, John thinks you're buying a shopping center, and, we need to start the scene.
Like 20 years old, and she's already wheeling and dealing.
Yes. We're backstage one day, and she's like singing a song. It was just before the final count, in the last 10 minutes before the show for the taping. And here we are, all our costumes and makeup, everything. And she's like singing this song, kind of humming. And I went, Jaya, you're too young to know that song. And she goes, sha-na-na. Well, at the time, there was a TV show with this group called Sha-Na-Na, and all they did was cover famous songs. And I said, Jenilee, that was their song. That song was big when I was your age. And she goes, Sha-Na-Na.
That is hilarious. And it's funny that you remember that.
I know. I'll never forget it because she was so innocent. She actually thought they were a hit group doing their songs. And we're talking, they're doing one top 40 song after another, and this young girl thinks that these are all their songs. And Annie Wedgeworth, oh my God, more precious, vulnerable actress you could never hope to work with. She's such a sincere person, unguarded, graceful, and gracious, that when she goes into the work that she does as an actress, the vulnerability and availability of the deepest parts of her are so there. She brings a kind of fragility to the role that causes everyone else to have to step up a little.
That's
because
nice.
she has taken it to a place of honesty and nakedness
Mm-hmm.
that we all as, actors hope to reach, and Annie just kind of did it without thinking.
Would you say Anne was somewhat ethereal? Because someone had described her as rather ethereal.
As a person, I would,
Yeah.
as an actress, she's way more present than that. But yeah, as a person, I think that you could easily describe Anne as that, because there was this fragile, ladylike gracefulness about her. But even like in Steel Magnolias, when you watch her work as an actress, it's like, wow. She's on screen maybe a sixth of the time in the film, but every moment that she's out there.
Yes.
And that's, the level. And to be able to step into scenes with these powerful actresses who are on screen most of the time. So it's hard when you just come here for a little bit, and because they're doing it all day, and you're just like here for this little bit, to hold your own, in the presence of that. It's a statement of really what, deep talent that she had and personal presence.
Wow, that's very nice. Yet, all these amazingly talented people coming together, and sometimes very different people, going back to the polarity thing, but it all struck magic, and in different incarnations, the Suzanne years and the Priscilla years, but it's been so much fun going down through the decades with you. Now that you're back in your element in theater, what's next for you, and what are you hoping to reimagine for Act 2 of your life, or Part 2 of your life?
Oh, honey, given the age that I am, you are so sweet to say Act 2 instead of Act 10. There is a new play that we are in conversations about my doing the world premiere for, but, we have not signed on the dotted line, so that sits there. But it's really, really funny, and it's really well written. So I reckon that's the next thing. But in terms of, I know people are supposed to create goals and, how they lay out their life. I really have just tried to walk with myself and trusted that the next thing would kind of show me. And tried not to think about what I should do next, as opposed to sense or feel what felt like the right move to make or thing to do. Now, there are times where you can go through really empty periods if that's how you're guiding your life. You can be a lot more proactive, which is terribly good to be, but you can be active just being busy if you think your way through it. So I find I just get quiet and sort of intuit what would be the next proactive thing to do. And sometimes, that's just watering your garden. Sometimes that's just being in touch with yourself. And Mother Earth and your own spiritual process and your guides and teachers, the angels who are around you, that, sometimes it's just washing your dishes and being really present with that. And the next thing that you should do, the person you should call, or the person who crosses your mind, or the letter that you wish you'd written to this director 5 years ago, or whatever. Then I should just sit down and do that. So I don't actually know how things will play out, but I feel fortunate that as an actress at my age, we're not always in huge demand. There aren't that many roles for us. So I feel very grateful that I'm still able to work and allowed to work, and my sense is that is going to happen until it's going to just keep on happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have a sense that I'm not going to be allowed to do that. Maybe I'm wrong, but my sense is there'll be a little spot here or there, and I'll be able to, give what I love to give, and I'll get to do that, for as long as I'm in this earth walk. That's my sense. Now, it may change form, who knows? Maybe I'll go teach or something. I can't imagine, but maybe. You never know.
That would make your dad very happy, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't that be just, kind of the full cycle of things, or the full circle of things coming back around? Because I've been asked so often, and, I have done seminars and things, but I keep saying, well, if I ever think I know enough to, teach a whole year, I will. So, and there's the same thing about, all the invitations or with publishers or, interview questions about when are you going to write a book. I'm like, well, if I ever think I know enough.
You do.
I'm still trying to, learn.
You do. Well, maybe there's more than one book there. This is what I know up till today, and then
maybe a few pamphlets.
Okay, right. Well, you're very modest. I want to end on a fun note because we've gone through serious and sad, and I appreciate the spirit of your cooperation all through this interview.
Oh, honey, we've walked through a small version of life you've just described. Interesting.
On a fun note, I know you're not very computer or internet savvy, but
yeah, you do know that.
There is, I don't know if you know this, there is a Facebook page called Joyce DeWitt Birthday Party. And it's a group of people, I'm Facebook friends with the guy that does this, who every year on your birthday for the last few years, April 23rd, they get together and they celebrate. And they even do like a little kind of faux red carpet and a backdrop with like the legs commercial.
Joyce, you've got a great pair of legs.
A smooth look is a sexy look, and it's yours with undie legs. Pantyhose with a stay-put panty. Undie legs go under the clingiest of clothes, erasing wrinkly panty lines forever. All that's left is you.
Stretching, bending, standing. There's one pantyhose that's always fitting. Nothing's a great pair of legs.
What do you make of that? I mean, as you keep moving forward in life, Three's Company and Legs and all these sort of things that people embrace from the 70s and 80s keep replaying. And what do you make of that? And the legs thing, I mean, people embrace that whole era.
I know. The nice thing is that people say, oh, we have the same legs. Because people ask me all the time, how do I, feel about being associated with the show so strongly? Or, sometimes people call me Janet instead of Joyce. And I know there are actors, John and I used to talk about this. I mean, I know that there are actors and actresses who have a sensitivity to that. But John and I used to always think, well, John, Jack, Joyce, Janet, they all start with J, so it kind of went into the wash. But the way in which people, when they recognize me, and it's because of that character, we were given the love that people had for those characters. We were given that as human beings, whether we deserved it or not. People loved John and myself and Suzanne and Priscilla and everybody like they loved those characters. So when they recognize us, it's an explosion from the heart. It's such joy. I don't know how one could have difficulty with that. Yeah, you have a bad day where you really don't want to talk to a stranger because you just want to get in the car and, shoot yourself in the head because you just, did something so stupid, and someone wants to talk to you. Yeah, of course, there are days like that. But outside those times where, your own life is so overwhelming that you can't see outside your own eyeballs, it's just so beautiful because it's always this pure expression of love and joy from the heart. So...
That's nice.
And the whole thing about legs and stuff, it's very nice as a woman my age for people to think that I still look good because they're seeing me in the eyes that they saw those whole commercials.
Do you ever walk down the street and hear, Joyce, you've got a great pair of legs?
Yes, honey, I do. And I will go, you have very kind eyes. Because clearly they're being reminded of a picture that's stuck in their mind, So it's like, okay, fine. Someone thought of me like that, for a moment. So it's very sweet. It's very cute. And it's very dear. I mean, Janet created such a beautiful relationship for me with the audience because women and men are both comfortable with me. And I can't tell you how many women have come up to me over the years and said, my husband has been so in love with you. Do you mind? Can I bring him over? Will you meet him? And I'm like, absolutely. So it's that character gave me the opportunity to have a relationship with men and women in the audience in a way that we were all kind of walking down the road together.
Yeah.
She was a great gift to my life. I mean, people expect that we can have a conversation as opposed to just an autograph, because of that character, not because of who they know me to be. They haven't met me. But because of the relationship that she created with me, or with the audience for me, that's a gift. And all of us at Three's Company, I think, would have to say that. That the affection that the audience had for these characters was given to us, quite frankly, whether, we deserved it or not. At moments we maybe do, and other moments, oh dear Lord. But yeah.
That is very cool. You know, it's kind of funny to bring it all full circle with Three's Company and spirituality. Who would think? Who would think?
Yeah, who would have thunk? I mean, we were just trying to make people laugh.
And those critics didn't know it was a religious experience to watch.
Yes, they didn't know. And who would have known? And you know, Chris, you know, I walked down the street here in New York, and there were young women in their 30s, early 40s, and they stopped me and go, you know, I became a lawyer because of you.
Amazing.
You know, and, you know, you were smart and da 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 da. And I'm like, thank you, you know. Or they'll say, you know, I wasn't that attractive when I was in college, and I knew that I was okay and that I could be okay and have a good life because you didn't have to, you know, have to be beautiful for people to want you and like you and da da.
Nice.
And this is all we were trying to do was do a contemporary version of a classical Fido 17th century farce in modern time and make people laugh. And all these lovely things get said. I mean, I got a letter from a lieutenant who was in rehab back from Iraq just last week, and she's in with a group of others who are trying to figure out how to be back after Afghanistan and Iraq. And she said, you know, there are these 7 women, and they were from captain up to a major and in rehab together, and that the one thing that would gather them together is that they were watching reruns of Three's Company.
Oh, wow.
And that all the different ranks and different experiences, you know, the one, he's got like tattoos of girlfriends all over her arms, you know, and the other was married to a general who was, you know, left behind to the other side, you know, passed to heaven in Afghanistan. There's all these different lives from Tennessee, Boston, New York, and they would sit and watch the show together and laugh and talk afterwards about it and then about their lives. And who would think that you could be a part of something 30 years ago that at this time could help create such a moment?
That's really cool. And I have to say that the producers created Three's Company and wrote the show, and in that regard created the characters, but you guys gave these characters the heart and soul, and that's what people connect with all these years later. In addition to the comedy, it's all a package. And
that's so kind.
so you're getting back out of it what you put into it. Like it says, John Ritter's favorite line, at the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. And I think that that can be said about this whole experience.
Oh, Christopher, thank you. What a beautiful thought.
Well,
thank you.
I just want to prove that, you know, some of us Three's Company fans are deep. But we really appreciate so much your time, Joyce.
And thank you. And I think being deep as a mud puddle is terribly important.
Exactly.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I feel sorry for you. This is so long, you probably are going to not be able to fit it on your program.
I think a 2-parter.
It was wonderful getting to talk about these people that I loved, both the ones on the camera, you know, Jack and Janet and Chrissy and Terry and Larry and so forth, and the people who were inside those. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, and thank you for sharing, as always. I am so grateful, and, you know, have fun in your last couple weeks as Miss Abigail, and we look forward to the next Joyce DeWitt production, whatever that is.
Thank you. You would enjoy this play, Chris. I mean, it's really very funny, and it does have those moments, you know, like the dancing show in Three's Company, where the heart is just opened, and then it goes back to just being hysterical, which That's my favorite kind of material to do. So you would enjoy it. Sorry, you're on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast.
Well, if you do a traveling show, let me know.
I totally will.
Thank you again so much, Joyce, and we look forward to hearing lots of more good things from you in the future.
Thank you. I shall do my best not to disappoint.
And disappoint she won't. Best of luck, Joyce. And all of you, make sure to check out her new satirical play, I'm Connecticut. It runs December 1st through the 10th at the Connecticut Repertory Theater on the University of Connecticut campus.
Three's Company was videotaped in front of a studio audience.
Celebrities aren't the only ones of us who can realize their dreams and reimagine their lives. According to dream interpreter and science of mind practitioner Yvonne Reba, we all have the power to tap into the language of our subconscious minds and apply these often mystical messages and sometimes scary and foreboding messages to our conscious thought and our positive action. In the second installment of our ongoing discussion with Yvonne, who can be reached, by the way, at YvonneReba.com, YvonneRyba.com, she tells us how even scary dreams with destructive content have the potential to be creative and even life-saving forces, tools in our lives. I have to share an anecdote here. As Yvonne says in the upcoming segment here, she talks about big dreams that people had before they got on the Titanic that, had they listened, might have saved their lives. And as she said that, what popped into my mind was a pretty horrific dream, nightmare, I had about 10 years ago. I was probably 29 at the time, and not to give too much away because we talk about it here shortly, but I had this dream that a nuclear bomb hit, and all of my life, this vision that I had manifested in my life of having this great apartment looking out into the Hollywood Hills, I could even see the Hollywood sign, was all gone in an instant. And I had dreamed of this very vision for years, particularly during my last 2 or 3 years of college in Tulsa, which I could not wait to get through. I had a couple of fields of study I was finishing up. So when this manifested, and for 4 or 5 years, it was really great. I had this wonderful, wonderful life. And then I had this scary dream. And the person in the dream was somebody that I worked with at the time who was a very bombastic, volatile woman. And I think she was put in the dream sort of symbolically to represent a friend in my life at the time who I probably should have recognized really was like that person, but I didn't want to recognize that. So I think maybe my mind was telling me, you're getting ready to have this big change in your life. Someone like this person you work with is going to have a big meltdown, and maybe, my brain was telling me to prepare for this. I wish I had. And sure enough, a few months after that dream, all of these things happened, and eventually I moved on from that great apartment, and for a while it was very distressing. Of course, the friendship I mentioned ended as well with someone I had known for several years, and didn't realize that she was so not only self-sabotaging, but sabotaging of all of the opportunities and relationships in her life, because I'm not like that, and I didn't want to identify that in her. And maybe my brain was saying, let's take this person you work with, who is like this, openly, and place her in a context that you'll understand. And maybe it was just for me to know in retrospect, to have a little bit of understanding when I could go back to that dream and try to make some sense of it. But I wish I had had some tools that Yvonne is going to provide to us to maybe help dissect these dreams as they happen, so that we can listen to them and see what messages maybe we're supposed to be picking up. The great thing is, though, even if you don't fully understand your dreams or nightmares, if you just listen to your intuition and just trust that the universe is taking you in the direction that you need to go sometimes, even if you don't want to or don't think you need to go that way at the time, just follow your heart, follow your intuition, hang on tight, and you'll get there. I ended up, shortly after moving, in an even better circumstance, a fantastic oceanside apartment with a view of the beach in Venice Beach. And I just ended up there at the right time, so this person's meltdown happened at the right time, even though I didn't know it at the time. And I had this fantastic new vista, this vision of the ocean, of the beach. So my life was expanding. It took a meltdown, a bomb going off, for this change to happen, but ultimately it bloomed into something fantastic. And funny enough, not long after I moved, someone told me, you realize, because I had told them that I had written a book about Three's Company and I was working on, selling the rights to my book to NBC for a TV movie, which was actually happening at the time, that process. And I told them about my Three's Company connection, and they said, don't you realize that just 30 or 40 yards down the boardwalk here on Venice is where they taped the opening sequence of Three's Company with John Ritter falling off his bike? And believe it or not, I had no idea that that was the exact stretch of Oceanfront Walk where Three's Company began with Jack Tripper and the bike. I didn't know how long the boardwalk was. I assumed that it was, a mile long, but here it was right in front of my apartment. And when I realized that, and I sort of looked out there and I thought, oh my God, I can actually see from my apartment where Jack Tripper fell off his bike. The show began when I was 4 or 5 and ultimately would be such a meaningful thing in my life that would lead me exactly where 10 years ago I now was. Clearly, this is where I needed to be, and as soon as I moved that week, TV Guide contacted me. They wanted me to write a story about the 25th anniversary of Three's Company. So all these great things were happening, but I think my dreams were telling me, get ready, and you're either going to learn this now or you're going to learn this eventually. You can go back to the stream and have some appreciation for, yes, destiny is looking out for you. So with that said, let's talk to Yvonne and see what kind of interesting stories she can share with us this time. Hi there, Yvonne. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Well, it is great to have you back. We are thrilled to be mining you for all of your wisdom in the dream realm. What do you have for us this time around? Any more prophetic dreams?
Yes, Chris. One of the dreams that I was going to talk about last time, and I didn't get enough time really. I know I took more time than I should have, I think.
Oh, it's fine.
It was about a friend of mine who had a dream that saved his life. And this is what happened. His name is Alejandro, and from that you can tell that he has Hispanic parents. When he was very young, they weren't around a lot, and his grandmother had a lot to do with his upbringing. And she used to do breakfast every morning and make these apparently wonderful corn tortillas that he said every morning, he said he knew he was going to get the corn tortillas. He'd rush into the kitchen, and there she was making them. Anyway, time went by. Alejandro grew older. He got to be a young man. And by this time, his grandmother had passed on. And he wasn't in a good place in his life. He was poor. He was trying to make his way. And I can tell you right now that he did make his way and became a very successful businessman and a creative person, too.
Fantastic.
Yes, really good. But this might not have happened if he hadn't paid attention in the dream that he had. It was winter time, and in Texas, unless you live up in Dallas, you don't really get a lot of snow or anything like this. But we had a very cold winter this particular year, and he was very cold. He had no money. He was living in a pretty sparse kind of bedroom, kind of efficiency type thing. And he went out and bought himself a space heater. And those things can be pretty dangerous. You have to be careful with them.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, he had the space heater in the bedroom, and he was asleep, and he could hear, he said, he could hear as he was just struggling to come awake, his grandmother's voice shouting to him, as she normally did when he was a kid. Come on, son, wake up. Corn tortillas are ready. And she was saying, come on, wake up, son. And he was coming awake, trying to, and he realized the room was full of smoke. In fact, the room was on fire, and he just managed to get himself out of there before he would have been overcome with smoke and couldn't get it. But he said his grandmother's words and voice was still ringing in his ears.
Wow.
And he said he was quite sure that she was making sure he woke up and got out of there. Whichever way, subconscious, warning him, whatever. The way to get him up was to get the tortillas on the go, because that was what he used to get up for. She knew how to get him out of bed to get him to school. And that was what the dream said. It said, time to get up, there's something great here. Of course, the great thing was that his life was saved.
Wow.
It's a very important dream for him because he's talked about it to me several times. His grandmother was such an important person to him that it would be natural for her to be the person who saved him.
So that could have been a visitation from her from another realm,
Yes.
speaking to him in terms that he would respond to.
Well, yes, and I do believe that at times people do have that kind of dream or vision or whatever you want to call it. Visitation's good. And some people will poo-poo that idea, but if it saves your life, whatever the source, whether it's your grandmother who's passed over or whoever, or it's your spiritual guide, or it's your connection with God that is warning you, it's doing the work.
Right.
It's getting you out of the problem. And that's what a lot of that kind of dream does. Of course, people ignore the warning or don't think it's important, and they go down with the ship, like the Titanic,
Like the Titanic. Now, there is, you have to wonder if there were many prophetic dreams about something like the Titanic where so many people perished with that ship.
Yes. Well, there were. A lot of people had dreams. The Titanic, being the largest ever passenger ship made, as it were, and having such a huge hype about it before it was launched, that was a great symbol in the subconscious of all of Europe, really. Everybody knew about it. All the rich people that possibly could had gone to England so they could be on the, maiden voyage across the Atlantic. A lot of famous American and very wealthy American people went down with the ship, the Strausses in New York.
Right.
She wouldn't get on the lifeboat without her husband, that kind of thing. So it was very, very much in the consciousness of the time as a symbol of man's superiority over the element. Well, of course, don't tempt fate, as it were, but there were several people whose lives had been saved by dreams of not getting on the Titanic. And then there was one person who told everybody that he'd had a dream warning him not to go on the Titanic, but he wasn't going to pay any attention to it. He was a businessman, and he had made plans to go, and that was it. He was going to go. He didn't believe the dream he just thought it was an anxiety dream. However, his business plans changed, and he couldn't go. So whether he wanted it or not, he didn't go on the Titanic. But can you imagine what he must have felt when he found it had gone down?
Oh, my gosh.
So a lot of people had dreams. Some people, or at least two people, who didn't go on the Titanic because of dreams that they'd had.
Are these instances, are they documented?
Yes, they're mentioned in books. I can't remember all of the names, but there are some really good books on dreams. So there's one that I have. I think I've got 2 copies of it, as a matter of fact. It's called Our Dreaming Mind, and it's by Robert L. Van der Castle, Ph.D. And this book starts off with the earliest dreams ever mentioned in history.
Really?
I mean, we're going back to Babylonian times and things like that.
Wow.
And it's a fascinating book. It really is. And it has all sorts of different kinds of dreams that are mentioned. And it mentions the Titanic. I don't think there's too much about that in there, but I have seen it in other places too. It's really it's an incredible book. A lot of research gone into it.
Well, at first I wonder if some of these dreams could have been like maybe symbolic, since the Titanic symbolized, like you said, man's power over the material world and all these different great hope and all these things that the Titanic symbolized before it sank. Now it has a very different symbol. But
yes.
I wonder if any of those types of dreams are maybe not to be taken literally. What popped into my head is when you were saying that is a scary dream I had when I lived in Hollywood. I had this great apartment, 3rd floor, looking out into the Hollywood Hills, saw the Hollywood sign. I had dreamed of this very vision for years, and here I was, and it was great, and everything was going well. And I had this terrible dream that I walked into the living room, and this gal that I worked with, who was very volatile, very bombastic even, was just in my living room, and before I even had a chance to ask her what was going on, like a hydrogen bomb hit outside in the Hollywood Hills, and everything turned orange, and it was like, oh my God, you're thinking, of course, this is it. And then you wake up, but it was very scary. And obviously there wasn't any, thank God, big nuclear meltdown globally at that point. But what would that kind of thing mean to someone if they're trying to get meaning out of it? Because you don't want to sit there and worry about, the apocalypse if you don't have to.
No, no. So the gal who was kind of volatile and so on was having problems, or were you having a problem with her? Or?
I tried to avoid her.
Uh-huh.
Ultimately, there was a parting of the way with another friend of mine that I think she represented in a weird way, that I didn't realize that my friend had all of those same types of anger management issues bubbling up. And maybe my brain put this girl in my
Yes.
apartment for that
Yes.
reason. So, yeah, so I'm like, scary girl and the hydrogen bomb.
Oh, yeah, it's kind of scary. I give you that one.
Yeah.
Yes, this is what I think. And I always say the person who knows the most is the person who dreamed the dream. And because you are aware of what was going on around you, and that's important, was there a problem and how to solve it? A dream will give you an answer. Sometimes people ignore it, but I have had so many times people have had recurring dreams or dreams that have helped them when they've paid attention to them. Now, an atom bomb or a hydrogen bomb or anything like that, that is a huge amount of energy. However, you must have seen, I'm sure we've all seen pictures of the bomb before it blows up. All right, it's just a teeny little thing.
Right.
Okay, and then suddenly there's whoo, wham, and there we go, and it's incredible the amount of energy released. So it's a suppression of energy, which is suddenly released. And it sounds to me like somebody was repressing a lot of energy. And it could have been this girl, or it could have been you thinking, I need to get out of here. This is not doing me any good.
Right, right.
You know.
Absolutely. If you're the kind of person that doesn't like to make waves, and then all of a sudden this kind of thing is telling you, you know, there's going to be a blow up. So maybe it's just saying release things, you know, so that it all doesn't blow up at once.
Well, if you feel at the end of the dream when you wake up and you feel terrible, you pay attention to that. If you feel wonderful, you pay attention to that. That is the clue, as it were, to what this dream is about. Now, you felt terrible, so you thought, I am going to have this huge explosion here if I don't do something about this. And you moved out. I mean, you decided, well, this I can't cope with this. It's going to be a big explosion. I don't want it. I'm going to go. So there was that to it. That is a kind of precognition. Yes, it is. Yes, a warning. Yeah.
And in a sense, even though, you know, maybe your life mortally isn't in danger, your life emotionally and spiritually can be very much in danger. And so those dreams kind of maybe help save you in that regard.
Absolutely. Yes, there's more than one way to be saved. In fact, some people's lives are totally emotionally destroyed for a time because they can't cope with the after effects of some huge confrontation or, you know, whatever it is, intervention, whatever you want to call it. Everybody seems to get onto them. So that is true, yeah.
It's very true. But this history of dreams that you mentioned and going back, do you have any other examples of these early documented prophetic type dreams?
Well, I haven't got any of the very early ones, and perhaps I'll do that sometime. Dreams in the Bible, for instance, which I'm not going to do now, but dreams in the Bible are very, very interesting. I did a series of articles for a newspaper many years ago about biblical dreams translated or interpreted.
Oh, that's fascinating.
I lived in Utah, and Mormons are very much into dreams. They do believe in that.
Just ask the Osmonds.
Yeah, yeah. So they got on to me about dreams, and I did biblical ones, and I did some others for a magazine or something at the time.
Wow.
But, well, this is a set of dreams that I wanted to tell you about, and it was set in Wales, you know, the British Isles. I had Welsh grandparents, as a matter of fact, and we never called them grandma and granddad. We always called them Nine and Tide. That's the Welsh name for it. Nine was grandma. Anyway, there's a little village. Wales has a lot of mining, coal mining there. And, you know, you've seen on the old movies of the singing Welshman coming out of the pit, you know, that kind of thing.
Right.
You know, getting a beer or two and singing away home. Well, Aberfan, or Aberfan, as they would say it, was a little coal mining village, and in 1967, it was the scene of a most terrible tragedy. The coal mine, as they all do, have what is known as a slag heap. That's where all the slag and sludge that's left after you've blasted the coal, they were making coke or whatever. It's all slung out on the great big mountains of it. And it had rained very heavily that week, and it rained so much that nobody realized it was undermining this slag heap, which set off from the top part of it, set off from the top of the mountain, as it were, slid down into the village and completely engulfed the local school, the younger children especially, their school. There was 118 children in this school, and they were all killed by this terrible black sludge that engulfed them, and of course their teachers and so on. I think there may be one or two escaped, but 118 children died. Now, before this, a few weeks before, people started having dreams about this terrible tragedy in which, and it varied in the dreams. All the dreams were not the same, but people saw a village being engulfed by black clouds, or some people saw black horses racing down the side of a mountain and destroying a village, and so on. There were all sorts of different kinds of dreams, but everyone felt terrible about this, like there was something awful coming up. Now, some of the people who had dreams were the actual children themselves. And this was documented. People talked about this before it happened. And one little girl, she had this dream, and she said to her mom, her name was Errol May, and she said, listen to this dream. She said, we go to school, but there's no school there. Something black has come down all over it. And she said to her mom, but I'm not afraid to die, Mommy. I'll be with Peter and June. Ooh. Peter and June were her friends. And when the psychic did come down and smash into the school and bury it all, she was with Peter and June, and she was killed too. And her mom had told the neighbors about this dream, about how weird it was for a little kid to say she wasn't afraid to die. You know, this was something very unusual, and they all remembered it. And she wasn't the only child that had dreams about it too. In fact, so many people had dreamed about this Aberfan. In fact, one person had seen the words Aberfan and had told people about this dream. And it was so intense, this feeling, that they began a registry of prophetic dreams. And which,
oh, really?
Yes, they did. In England, they started this center up. A psychiatrist had found like 35 people at least who had very credible dreams that had been told to other people before the actual disaster. And he had them write them out and have them witness that they were recorded beforehand or had been told beforehand. He didn't expect them to write it up, but he did expect people to have some evidence that they'd had them. And he started this registry off. And in that, anybody who had a dream that signified perhaps an airplane crashing, a ship going down, some natural disaster, whatever, were to send the dream, witnessed by somebody else, with the date and the time and all the rest of it. Couldn't be after the fact, it had to be before. And he made a record of them all, and then he looked, and when there was some kind of disaster, he looked to see how many people had had that kind of a warning. And he found that there were a considerable number of people who were dreaming about things, and sometimes even getting the number of the plane or part of the number of the plane that crashed.
Oh, wow.
They were getting details, yes. So we are able to tap into this consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, that allows you to see things that are looming up in the near future.
Mm-hmm. And in some instances, perhaps we are meant to take heed, to take warning, and perhaps in some instances, like the case with the young girl who wouldn't know that this might be a warning, maybe it's just a message that came through that hopefully eventually gave her mother a little bit of comfort to know that
she would be okay.
That she would be okay. Yeah.
Absolutely, Chris. You got it right. This is, we all have to go. And then there's this tremendous fear about dying, especially in the Western world. It's like, we're all scared to death about it. And really, we shouldn't be. We shouldn't be, because it is part of the natural order of things. Right. And we should talk about it more. And we should be aware that when it goes, we don't die. Mm-hmm. And this is part of my spiritual belief system coming through. We talked a little bit about me being a practitioner in science of mind, religious science.
Right.
We do not believe that anything dies. We believe that it changes.
It changes.
Yes, yep. Science proves that nothing can be totally destroyed. It just changes. Now, even the atom bomb, the hydrogen bomb, you say, well, that destroyed everything. No, right. It changed everything to something else.
It did that. You cannot destroy or create matter or energy.
That's right. We're all created.
I'm pretty sure that's science.
Yes. Yes. Well, that's part of it, you see. And it's a funny thing that quantum physics, many years after Ernest Holmes started to write about, we are all one, we're all created from the same stuff, and so is everything in the universe, by the way. And it has to be. Where else could it come from? got to be created from the beginning.
Another thing based on this principle very quickly here of energy, people that can't wrap their heads around the idea of psychic energy, and I appreciate a healthy skeptic, but
Yes.
people that are too closed-minded, I have to wonder, well, how do you think a TV or a radio gets its signal? There's stuff floating around that we can't see, and our brains pick up these waves. And why not give yourself more credit? The human brain is a pretty perceptive thing. So it's fascinating to hear you link that philosophy with the dream world, because those dreams, lots of times they're trying to tell us something.
Well, they are. And one of the messages that comes through and not just prophetic dreams, but dreams that give us clues as to how to live our life. If we have a big problem coming up, we might want to change our jobs. We hate the one we're in, but we can't think what to do. Or change our partner or whatever it is. That subconscious will come through and start giving you messages on how to do it. But we ignore them because we don't think it means anything.
Yes, and I think we can all look back in retrospect and probably see at least one dream, like my hydrogen bomb dream,
Absolutely.
that probably was a message. And if I could go back with maybe the knowledge I have now, I would have dissected that dream a bit more and gone, okay, why did that happen when I was inside my apartment?
Mm-hmm.
What do I need to start thinking about, and what kind of change should I embrace here? So for it to be constructive even from the most destructive of dreams, I think is, a good thing.
Absolutely. I agree.
Well, we enjoy having you here, and we can't wait to hear more of this great history, and we appreciate it so much, Yvonne.
Well, I appreciate being on here. Thank you very much, Chris. It's great talking with you.
Reimagine That with Chris Mann is brought to you by Retroality TV. Copyright 2011 by Chris Mann. You can find us at retroality.tv and at reimaginethat.libsyn.com. Tweet us at retroalitytv or join us on Facebook at facebook.com/retroalitytv. And don't forget to check out our TV channel at youtube.com/retroalitytv. We wish you a very happy Halloween, and remember, if a charming stranger comes knocking on your door, dressed in a leisure suit and holding a plunger, don't act like you've seen a ghost or Mr. Chicken. In the immortal words of Janet Wood, who'd lie about being Mr. Furley?